Hello, this is Justin Ruger with Accessible Beekeeping. We have Jonathan, our co-host, and our guest tonight is Beth from Tennessee. How are you doing today, Beth?
Oh, pretty good. Pretty good. Glad to
And
be
how are
here.
you, Jonathan?
Doing pretty good.
So tell us a little bit about how you got started in beekeeping and how long you've been doing it.
Um, when I was 4, my grandfather put me and my sister on a log out in the garden, and he told us that if we stayed really calm, we wouldn't get stung. And I remembered that like it was yesterday, and it was my first lesson in being calm. And until I got my hives last year, I never got stung. And I've had plenty of opportunities. I've been in the middle of hornet swarms and uh, things like that. So, um, but my husband and I bought some property a few years ago, about 4 years ago, and I told him when we bought it, I said, I want bees. I've always wanted bees. I will always want bees. I'm going to have bees. I took 2 years and just read everything I could get my hands on as far as beekeeping is concerned and about the bee and biology and everything I could get my hands on. And that was mainly to decide whether that was something that I really wanted to do or really could do physically. And I decided that I was going to keep my mantra of where there's a will, there's a way, and figure it out as I went along. And took a nosedive and jumped in. And I was originally planning on doing the AZ hives and ended up in the langstroth hives. And that was a nice learning experience, but I'm really glad I did it because I learned how to work them even with my disability. So,
So you said you had to see if you could physically do it. What are your limitations, if you don't mind us asking?
it's very difficult for me to stand more than 10, 15 minutes in one place. It's also very difficult for me to walk repetitively for very long. Um, and beekeeping, you need to do both. You need to be able to stand and work your hive. You need to be able to walk back and forth. Um, I also have weight limitations where I can't lift a lot of weight. Um, and I have a very, very harsh chronic pain that happens if I do. My spine tends to swell, my spinal cords, my spinal column swells, which causes a great deal of pain, both nerve pain and muscle pain. And so I have to be careful as far as endurance is concerned. If there's something in the hive that happens that I have to take care of that entails weightlifting and many hours of dealing with it, I won't be able to walk for the rest of the day, and maybe not the day after, and maybe not the day after. So it's I really have to weigh what I can do and how long I can do versus how important it is, how urgent it is, and what I'm willing to pay for as the outcome. And that's a constant. That I always have to think about those things. Um, if it's something that's an emergency that has to happen now and it takes all day to deal with, I have to shuffle the rest of my life around so that I can deal with the recovery period afterwards. So,
I don't know if you got to see Jonathan's interview, but he has spinal bifida. Did I
mhm.
pronounce that right?
Spina bifida.
Yeah, that you have to deal with some of the same thought processes, right?
Exactly. Yeah. A lot of weight restriction. I can lift some, but can't lift quite as much as what a lot of people do due to my weaker back, and I've had to figure out a lot of ways to get around that. And then, like you said, walking. That's I work my beats from a power chair, so not able to really stand and work like that.
if I walk with a cane, then I can walk for much longer because I
Mm.
need that support. When I'm in the bee yard, I don't use a cane, and so
Okay.
I have to use my hands. And when you use a cane, you can't use both of your hands.
Mm.
So I do have a chair that's out there that I can sit on if it gets really bad for a few minutes to try to recover a little bit. But for the most part, I work the langs in a very different way than I think most people do, but I'm able to do so.
Mm.
And it's really rare where there's such an emergency that I have to just work and work and work and work. And when I get into the door, just tell my husband, "Don't talk to me. I'm going to go to the bed. I just gotta go." Or drop down on the floor, one of the two. So
You said that you work the langstroth hives differently than most people. Would you like to give us more information on that?
with weightlifting, instead of if I don't have to lift a box, I don't. And the only time I really have to lift a box is if there's something really going on and the bees, I've already been working for a very, very long time, and the bees are really, really stressed, and I can't stand it much longer. So I'll lift a box at the end of that just to get done. But what I normally do is I'll take 2 boxes that are empty with me out to the bee yard. And instead of lifting a box, I literally take one frame at a time and transfer them over a little bit at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And when I need a break, I take a towel and I put it over the box that I'm working on, and I put it over the box that I'm transferring from. To keep the bees calm, I go and sit down for a few minutes. And then when I'm ready to take the bees off, I'll go back to work on it. And I've given myself permission while working the langs, especially, that if I need breaks, I take breaks. Even if everything's all over everywhere, all over the bee yard, and bees are flying all over the place, I take breaks. I don't make myself do something when I'm getting to the point where I end up collapsing in the bee yard and can't help anybody or anything or myself. So, so I'm very careful with that. But I think the biggest one is transferring the the frames one at a time. And I've gotten to the point when I first started, just doing one box took a very long time to do because I was looking and trying to figure out things and trying to figure out what on earth I was looking at. And now I look at it, I flip it, I put it over. I look at it, I flip it, put it over. It's much, much faster than what it was when I first started.
It's a lot of the similar way that I work mine too.
Yeah.
I mean, to cut you off there, but I take a couple boxes and put it on a wagon too beside me and transfer frames.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very helpful. It's slower.
Mm-hmm.
It's slower, but I think the bees stay calmer because they're
Absolutely.
together longer. They're not out on the ground,
Mm-hmm.
leaning up against something. They're in a box.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they stay calmer um, and I found that if I do that also, if I miss the queen, I don't risk losing her because the frames are not propped up against something. They're in a
Mm-hmm.
box.
Okay.
So, there's a lot of benefits to it. Another thing that I do is when there's something that's heavy, I walk it. I don't lift it. I let it stay on the ground and I'll move it one side, one side, one side, and one side, and I'll walk it over. I was able to get my laying hives onto their stands that way by walking them over. I use fulcrum all the time. I mean, but I've been doing that way before the bees. That's just something that I do as a management for myself so that I can get things accomplished without having to always ask for help for something. If I can manage it, that's better for my self-esteem, and it keeps people from getting irritated at me all the time. So,
You said that you have langstroth hives that you just said you have a layings hive and that you were working on getting Sylvanian AZ hives. I know Jonathan and I follow you on Facebook, and I swear you do more than commercial beekeepers do.
The last question went really funny. I wasn't able to hear it.
I swear you do more work than commercial beekeepers do.
Well, this last year, we're definitely building. We started out, I started out in the Lings because of COVID. I didn't plan on being in Lings at all, ever. I thought those were too heavy. I'm not even going to do it. But I'm glad that I thought that was a grace that I ended up in them, because I learned that if I shut myself off from something, I'm not allowing myself to grow in that, and find out about it. And I love the Lang Hive. I think it's just so versatile. Um, but I have 8 AZ hives that I purchased a while ago. 4 of them I purchased before I ever got the Langs, and 4 of them I purchased this last year. And getting them painted and ready to go into um, the bee house, and then building the bee house. Neil just built the bee hut that's going to be temporary. That was a lot of work. A lot of work. Getting the lanes painted and done was a lot of work. Um, Once everything is built and done, then it'll just be beekeeping. And that's a lot of work too. But I think you can organize that in a way that's consistent, and then expect the flukes that bees do because they don't read. you know. But I think every time I open a hive, I get a surprise. So, but I think
Yeah.
a way of managing that, in a consistent way.
So you have 8 Slovenian AZ hives already in their bee hut.
No, just 4 in the bee hut now.
4 in the bee hut now.
I have 4 hives in the bee hut now with 2 nukes, and I
Okay.
have the 2 lay-ins that I just put out this last weekend. We put out the AZ hives and we put out the lay-ins hives.
And are you still waiting on bees for those?
Yes, they should be here either next week or the week after. So those are about to go. And I'm only starting. I always I learned this early on, very early when I got the first nukes that I bought, that I have a hive that's empty with every hive that I have with bees in it, so that I can grow them over. I bought the last 2 nukes. I had 2 laying hives out with 2 nukes, and within 3 weeks, I was needing to split. So I mean, they just blew the doors off. And I didn't have a hive. I ended up taking time off work, going into town and buying a box so that I can put them somewhere. So that, no, we're not going to do that again. I'll buy a hive and get a hive, and we'll just do that way. And when I get to the point where I've got all the hives I want, I'll have all the hives I want, and I'll start giving things away. So, but I'm going to be opening 2 AZ hives with 2 packages and 1 Layens hive with a package. And then I'm buying a nuke for a langstroth hive. So, and one of my legs is going to split. It's going to have to split. So.
You said that lifting is hard for you, and when we watch your Facebook page, you do a lot of work with wax. And how did you handle your wax breakdown inside the honey house that you have when with your disabilities?
Well, at first I got too big for my britches and got a pot that was way, way too big. And I lifted it once and I emptied it and I put it down, and I haven't touched it since. So I decided that I was going to reevaluate things, and went out and bought smaller pots, that was I think they were like 10 quarts maybe, 10 quarts, and then I have a 16 quart that stays on the floor to pour it into. And this was a technique that I was trying out for large batches of wax, to be able to process it quickly. I could handle those sizes. 10 quarts my limit, though. I can't get any higher than that. The 20 and 25 quart stock pots, no, those didn't work at all. I think I broke myself that day. I was hurting. I was hurting really bad after that. And it only takes one lift. I don't have to sit there and repeat it. It only takes one time. So, but everything's a learning experience, and the trick with any disability, or really anything, because we all have our shortcomings, we all have our limits. Nobody has. We're not all, no. I haven't met Superman yet, except for in the comic books. Um, but it's always a matter of stepping back, evaluating it, and looking at it and seeing what can be done and how it can be done and what needs to be changed, and what will work and what won't work, and it's and never giving up, not throwing in the towel and saying, no, this can't be done. Well, it can be done. You just got to find out how it can be done. It may be done differently. So,
Is there anything that you did this winter that you have to reevaluate other than like the size of the pots? Is there anything with working with the beehives?
um, I'm going to be starting with the AZ hives this year, and that's going to be reevaluating. Um, you stand in front of the AZ hives, and standing is a real issue with me. Um, I have a stool that I can take out there that I can sit on and work with it. This winter was more about prepping and and making sure that I had the equipment that I needed. The first year, I think every beekeeper probably deals with this, was a learning experience on what equipment you really need and what equipment you don't need, and how much money you're spending on equipment that you don't need. And finding out that nothing matches what you really do. So I went through everything and changed a lot of things. Painting is a real problem for me. It's very difficult for me to do because I have to bend over a lot, and I can't bend over. I can't stand up a lot and do, it's a huge challenge. So one of the things that I've done is all of my lang hives are now going to be echo dipped. You dip them in,
Okay.
you stir them around, you take it out, you let it dry, and it's done. You don't have to sit there and stand and really do the physical labor. They're not as pretty, but they last just as long. And the echo treatment that I'm using is um, non-toxic. It's not harmful to the environment whatsoever, which I really thought was a plus. So, I think painting, doing that differently. If I can figure out how to paint the last, or how to do the last 4 AZ hives and echo treatment, I'm going to do that. I'm just Painting was hard. Um, I think of something else. Anything else? Being out in the cold um, doesn't react with the implant that I have in my spine right now really well, and I end up in a lot of pain because of that. So going out in the cold and checking on the hives was a real hard thing. I was on a heating pad almost all winter this winter to try to keep the pain level down. But I don't think you could have kept me away from the hives it wasn't gonna, I wasn't gonna sit there and just ignore them. I wanted to make sure that they were doing well, and there were a couple of times when I needed to help them out. So I'm glad I did. I'm glad I went out.
Is
Yeah.
your husband into bees?
At a distance. He's very interested. He's very fascinated by bees. Um, he's feeling a little bit more comfortable being in the bee yard, but it's a rare thing, and he's always, suited up really well. Um, he does not like to get stung, and what I think is funny is he doesn't get stung by my bees. He always gets stung by the red wasps that are here. you know, um, but he's very, very supportive. And that's wonderful. I mean, he does all the carpentry work, and he's willing to teach me what I don't know about the carpentry work because I really want to learn. Um, but he made the bee hut. He's about to make the bee house for next year. Um, he does anything that I need him to do in in carpentry, and it's been a sacrifice for himself because he's a glass blower, and he spent all this time that building the bee house or the bee hut and taking care of these things when he could have been putting together his glass studio and getting that started. So yeah, he's wonderful, very supportive.
That's amazing. I it's definitely important whether you have disabilities or not to have a supportive person in your corner,
Yeah,
but it feels even more important when you have a disability.
yeah, it is. I try to do as much physically as I can do for myself. I don't like the feeling of being a burden on someone. It's and that comes from when I first broke my back. I was really um, very, very. I was a rag doll. I had no arm control. I had no leg control. I had nothing. I couldn't speak for a while in any way that was really audible. Words would switch out, and it was. I had to learn how to speak again. Um, but the good thing is that I don't stutter anymore. So, but that during that period of time, it was really hard watching the people that I loved carry that for me
Yes.
in order for me to get back. And so I just, started working on getting myself back together again. My spinal cord was not torn in any way. It was traumatized severely. My brain had an injury that was pretty significant. The bones that were broken were pressing on the spinal cord, but they weren't cutting into it. So I made my if I got my muscles working in my back strong enough, they could pull the bones out. And for a very long time, I was in the gym all the time, but I was very strong and I worked very well. I couldn't feel the bottoms of my feet most of the time, and I still can't. But I had a very functional life. I got to that point until my spine collapsed again when I was in my 40s, and then I went into surgery, and then it's been another different trek from the first one.
If you could think of something that would help you in the apiary, some kind of hardware, what do you think would be beneficial to your apiary?
I think literally bars, like ballet bars where they do their exercises.
Like ballerinas?
Yeah, bars around my hives and in such a way that if I can't use my cane but I need to lean on something, I can lean on something. I and still do some work, or I can lean back against something. Have them close enough to where I can lean back against it and still use my both my hands. That would be very helpful. I'm not really sure how I would do that, but I've wished for that several times. Um, Another thing would be probably Neil and I bought a hive lifter, which I was able to actually do with him. That's something that would probably, if I'm by myself, help me to lift the hives. Because sometimes you have to move them, or
Hmm.
sometimes you just have to do it. And I'm still trying to figure out how to do that if I'm by myself. So
Is your hive lifter manual or electric?
it's manual. Yeah,
Okay, so that has to be hard for you.
yeah. Well, the one that we have, it's two people, and it really was not bad. It was it takes the pressure off of your hands. You're not lifting it with your hands, and it causes the weight to be evenly distributed on your upper body, so it doesn't go down to my lower body. So really, I was able to do it and do it quite comfortably. I was really surprised. I was very surprised. Neil had one side and I had the other. Now the hives were not loaded with honey either. They were early spring hives that we needed to move. Um, but still, it was a very helpful tool. Um, I think the biggest help that I would actually use is I've got to figure out some way to do the wax and then eventually process the honey. And I'm thinking that's my this year is the first year that I'm going to be processing honey. Um, that's going to be a challenge. Uh,
Major learning experience.
it's going to be a major learning experience because honey is heavy. So, especially a lot of honey all at once. And I already know I have enough freezers. That was the first thing on the list when we purchased the Langs and started building up the process. So I'm going to be processing as many frames as I can at a time, a little at a time. And I think that's the biggest thing with all of this is when I have a day planner that I started working in again. I haven't worked in a day planner in years. I used to do everything by my phone, and it found that with beekeeping it doesn't work. I need to write things down. Um, I take the things that I need to do with the bees, or the things I need to do in the honey house, or the things that I need to do in the yard, or whatever I need to do, and I break them up into smaller pieces. And if I can break them up into smaller pieces, then I can manage it very much, much better. Um, it gives me time to rest in between. It gives me time to do the things that I'm able to do without just killing myself doing it. They got just to give you an example, they got their summer equipment, their bottom board and their hive, their summer tops and everything, over a course of 2 months. you know, but they're all summarized now. So, but I took a little bit at a time. It just did a little bit at a time.
That's smart to do it step by step. And my mom actually just got me a day planner so that I could do the same thing with everything that's going on in the bees as well.
Yeah, I think I'm going to make that day planner a project in itself. I'd like to see a beekeeper's day planner.
No, that would be great. You can make a book out of it.
So, and if anybody has time to do it, they're welcome to do it too. If that's an idea, so, whoever
Yeah.
gets first, I just want one. I just want one really bad. So,
So, other than getting your bees, what is your next step?
my next step is cleaning the honey house. I've got the pots done from the wax. But actually, the next step is getting the bees started. But then we want to convert the honey house into it originally was a guest house, and then it became a honey house. And now I want it to be a honey house that accepts guests. And so that's going to be my next project, is getting that house to where my children can come and visit, and my grandchildren can come and visit, and anybody else that would like to come and visit and see the hives can do so, and do so comfortably. I'd love to, I don't know if I can manage it, but I'd love to get a observation hive in the honey house in the guest house
Yes,
for children to come and see.
I would love for that too.
Yeah, be able to watch that. But I have to find out how, I have to figure out how to manage an observation hive before I'm willing to actually get it. So I'm researching that now, trying to figure that out.
There's a book called The Observation Handbook by Frank Linton. I actually interviewed him last week, I believe, and he wrote it. And he's visually impaired, and he started off keeping bees with the observation hive before he ever went outside and started doing langstroths.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that's the only book on the market about using observation hives and how to take care of them. So I would definitely look into that and see what you think.
Yeah, I just wrote it down. I'll look that up because I'm very interested. I know that my grandchildren just are fascinated with bees, and two of them would like to have their own hives, and so we're talking about that. They'll probably have them here for a while, and then eventually have their own hive for when they live, where they live, when they can work and afford to support it.
I'm still trying to do that.
Yeah, so am I.
Well, is there anything else you can think of, Jonathan?
I don't believe so.
All right. Thank you so much for being here. It's been about 30 minutes of a wonderful time. And I just wanted to say, be different, be limitless, and continue beekeeping.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Jonathan. Y'all have a good night.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye.